This past Tuesday, an 18-year-old with an assault rifle shot and killed 19 fourth-grade children and 2 teachers in Uvalde, Texas. That was a week after a racially motivated shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo and another shooting at a Presbyterian church in Laguna Woods, California. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15 reads, "Thus says the Lord, a voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are no more." The grief of our mother Rachel in Jeremiah chapter 31 extends into the New Testament in Matthew chapter 2, when the anxious, brutal, and power-hungry King Herod, threatened by the news of Jesus' birth, has all of the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or younger killed. The text then says that the words of the prophet Jeremiah were fulfilled. With Rachel weeping for her children, she refused to be consoled because they are no more. Rachel's grief is the grief of the parents of those fourth graders in Uvalde. It is the grief of the family of the loved ones in Buffalo and in Laguna Woods. It is also the grief of God, and it is the grief of the church. God's grief is the soil for the church's ministry of peacemaking. Grief does not need to become stuck. Grief can grow into right action. You can feel the grief over acts of violence turning into right action when the prophet Isaiah announces that they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, turning spears and swords, weapons of war that had caused pain, like the assault rifles of our day, and converting them into agricultural and gardening tools for plowing and pruning. We can imagine God's grief over the violence that we are doing to each other, over our collective inability to work together to take common sense steps to reduce gun violence and the proliferation of high-capacity rifles, steps which, while not able to eliminate all acts of violence, can reduce the impact, over our collective fascination with violence and with guns as symbols of power, strength, control, and security. Violence has always been a spiritual issue. Grief is always a spiritual issue, and working together to curb our society's violence in our divided time is a spiritual issue. There is a ministry with the victims of violence. There is a ministry with the perpetrators of violence. And there is a ministry with developing public policy together that will address the violence. The ministry of peacemaking that grows out of the ministry of grief, though not being simple or easy. The ministry of peacemaking is a ministry to which God is calling the church. Friends, we'll see you soon.